Hi, this is Calandra. In this video, we'll be looking at how to add and subtract rational expressions. So first, whenever you're combining fractions, when you're trying to add or subtract them, you must have a common denominator. Okay, so you must have a common denominator. And then you combine like terms in the numerator. The denominator stays the same. So when dealing with rational functions, which are just fractions that involve variables, we're going to follow the same strategy. You'll have to get a least common denominator if you don't start with one, and this will be the least common multiple of your denominators. If you have trouble figuring out the least common denominator, all you have to do is multiply your different denominators together, and that will give you a common denominator. It's possible that you may have to simplify if you didn't come up with the least common denominator, but that's okay. You'll still come to the same result. Okay, another type of expression I want to make sure you know how to work with is if you have a negative in front of your fraction. When you have a negative written in front of the fraction, it's equivalent to pairing the negative with the numerator only, and it's also equivalent to pairing it with the denominator only. In most instances, it's going to benefit us to pair it with the numerator, but just note that these are all equivalent expressions. So keeping all of these things in mind, let's add the following rational expressions, and we want to simplify our answers. In the first one, we already have a common denominator. So we have these two things being subtracted. So since the denominator is the same, I can go ahead and write it. And I just have to combine what I have in my numerator. So we have 6a plus 10b. And now notice that we're subtracting this entire second fraction. So to show that we're subtracting all of this, we need to put the 7a minus 3b in parentheses. Another way that you could have thought about it is if you wanted to change this to addition and then pair the negative with the numerator like we were talking about before, you would come to a similar expression. So now we need to use the distributive property to get rid of our parentheses. So I have 6a plus 10b minus 7a plus 3b all divided by 7a. Combining our like terms, 6a minus 7a gives us a negative a. 10b plus 3b is 13b, and all of this divided by 7a. And that's our final answer. We cannot cancel out the a's because we don't have a product in the top. So don't make that mistake of just canceling those a's out, because you'd also have to be able to take a out of the 13b. Since that's an addition, this is one quantity in the top. All right, for part B, we have two different denominators, so we need to figure out what is our least common denominator. So we can start with the numbers. So what number goes into both? What is the smallest number that goes into, that both of these numbers go into? So that number would be 6. Okay, I notice that I have an a in the first fraction, so I need to have an a as part of my least common denominator. I have a c squared, and I have a c. Therefore, I'm going to need a c squared as part of my least common denominator. And I have a d, so that's also going to have to appear. So for this to be my least common denominator, I see I'm going to need to multiply each of my fractions by some terms to get me this denominator. So in my first fraction, since we started off with a 2 and I need a 6, I know I'll need to multiply by a 3. I already have the a, I already have the c squared, but I need a d. Well, whatever you multiply the bottom by, you also have to multiply the top by so you don't change the value of your fraction. Looking at our second fraction, in order to get our least common denominator, it looks like we're missing an a, so I need to multiply by a, and we're also missing a c, so that we would get our c squared. So we need to multiply the top and the bottom by a times c. So when we do that, in the numerator, we end up with 5 times 3, which is 15. D times d squared is d cubed, and we still have y, all over 6a c squared d, minus, on the top it looks like we have ac w squared. The order doesn't matter. Usually you'll write your variables in alphabetical order. When you're dealing with a lot of variables, that's pretty standard. So in the bottom, when we multiply everything out, we'll have 6a c squared d. So now that we have a common denominator, we just combine our numerators. So 15 d cubed y minus ac w squared all over that same denominator. And as complex as this looks, there's nothing we can do to cancel. There are no common terms to be factored out in the top, so this would be our simplified answer. For part C, okay, we have an x minus 1 and an x plus 2. So to get my least common denominator, I'm going to multiply those together because neither of these can be factored, so they're both prime. So my least common denominator in this case will be their product. X minus 1 times x plus 2. So in my first fraction, I need to multiply the top and the bottom by x plus 2. In my second fraction, I need to multiply the top and the bottom by x minus 1. So I know I'm going to have to distribute when I multiply this. So I'm going to write it as 2 times the quantity x plus 2. And I'm going to be subtracting 4 times the quantity x minus 1, because we'll have our least common denominator, so we can go ahead and write it as one fraction. Now let's go ahead and distribute and simplify. Distributing the 2 will give us a 2x plus 4. Distributing the negative 4 gives us negative 4x plus 4, and we have the same denominator. Again, simplifying the numerator, we'll end up with, combining our like terms, a negative 2x plus 8 divided by the same denominator. Now to see if we can cancel anything out, we have to have a product in the top. So I can factor a negative 2 out of my numerator. So x times negative 2 would take me back to negative 2x. And then I'd also need a negative 4, because negative 2 times negative 4 gives me the plus 8 that we started with. The denominator is the same, but notice there are no common factors. Therefore, this would be our simplified answer. Okay, going on to our third problem. Before we can get our least common denominator, we need to factor our denominator if it can be. So our first denominator can actually, we can take an x out, and we're left with x plus 6. So my least common denominator in this problem will be x times x plus 6. So the first fraction already has that denominator. The second fraction will need to multiply both the top and the bottom by x plus 6 to get it. So we can rewrite our problem as x plus 1, and then we'll have plus 2 times the quantity x plus 6 all over our common denominator of x times x plus 6. Now we're going to distribute the 2 to give us 2x plus 12 all over x times x plus 6. So I end up with 3x plus 13 all over x times x plus 6. And that would be our simplified answer for example D. Don't cancel out the x's because you don't have a product in the top. You have to have a product in order to cancel things out when you're dealing with fractions. Okay, well now to our last example. Before we can combine these, we need to factor our denominators. So you can take time to factor using our two-step process, but this first denominator is going to factor into an x plus 8 times x minus 1. And my second denominator is going to factor into, let's see, an x plus 2 times x plus 8. So this means that our least common denominator is going to have each of these factors in it. So it will be x plus 8 times x minus 1 times x plus 2. So in the first fraction, we're going to need to multiply by x plus 2, since that's what we're missing. So x plus 2 on the top, and also an x plus 2 in the bottom. In the second fraction, we're missing an x minus 1, so we need to multiply by x minus 1 in the top and x minus 1 in the bottom. So my numerator will be 3 times the quantity x plus 2, and then we're going to be subtracting 2 times the quantity x minus 1, and our denominator is the least common denominator. And you never need to multiply it back out. Once you have it in factored form, leave it in factored form. So now we need to distribute what we have in the numerator. So we have 3x plus 6 minus 2x plus 2, all divided by that denominator, x plus 8 times x minus 1 times x plus 2. When you combine your like terms, we'll have an x plus 8 in the numerator, all divided by that same denominator, x plus 8 times x minus 1 times x plus 2. So notice that our x minus 8's will cancel out. And that will leave us not with 0 in the top, but with a 1. So our final answer, our final simplified answer, is 1 over x minus 1 times x plus 2.